Morning, Yorkshire Classic Cars Ltd fans, and welcome to another day in sunny Retford. You will notice, if I wiggle you outside, how blooming sunny it is out there. It's probably the nicest day I've had in weeks, which is ironic because I've just taken my chili peppers home. I thought I'd introduce you to a new project that's on the go here. You'll notice the bonnet still hasn't come back for the Spitfire, just waiting for the sandblaster. His wife's been very ill, so it's a bit of a hold up. It's one of those things, can't help it. So with that in mind, I'm starting on this, which I can introduce you to, and it is a very red Rod Anglia. It's a little car. I think Harry Potter and Ron Weasley would be proud of it. It's a very solid little car. There is some rust, obviously, hence why it's here. And a few previous custom touches we'll describe them as, but they're not very custom. They're just bodges, really, but we won't say bodges. And yeah, I thought you'd introduce you to a few of the little jobs I'm going to do on it, and I'll video doing it. So, obviously it's an Anglia. You can see up there that this is a this is the base model Anglia. So you can see that the actual owners started making provisions there for opening rear windows. If I take you around the front, we know it's a base model Anglia, although it came with the pressed aluminium grille on it. When he removed that, as you can see, it's got the steel grille here. It's actually part of the front panel and is incredibly rare. Obviously, it seems when they've painted it last, they've covered the whole car in filler, which I've seen Americans do a little bit. Don't know why they do that. They seem to just cover the whole car rather than using filler primer. We use high build primer. They seem to just use a smear of something like dolphin glaze, but either way, doesn't matter. So it's just literally no rust in the arches. The wings are like brand new. One of the custom touches here is I'm going to slice this wing here. You can see there, and move all this wheel arch forward about 30 millimeters. That's to allow the owner to fit wider wheels. This is not a concourse standard restoration. It will, of course, be concourse quality work I do on it, because that's what I do. However, this car is going to be hot rod all the way. It's got a tuned crossflow going in it, a bullet box, 4-speed box, and some other little custom touches. It's going to be quite quick because I think the engine's about 180 horsepower or something daft like that. It's an absolute animal. Lots of Milton race prep bits and pieces, rack conversions, things like that. So yeah, so I think he's using Alicat wheels, but I'll confirm that later. And because of that, when you turn, it actually just rubs on the front of the arch. So rather than faff with the caster and affect the way it drives, we're going to actually move that forward a little bit. Obviously, that's not a priority job. That's a later on job. You can see the holes here that the owner has put rings around there, all for me to weld up. Any with blue tape over are for me to not weld up. But because it had the grille on, he's going to get rid of that and keep the standard pressed steel grille, which I think is a really good choice. It's got the kidney killers there on the wings. They're staying. Underneath the car, if I just bob her up a little bit. Now, before anybody goes, there's rust holes in it. Yes, there is a couple of rust holes in it. But if you'd just like to take a little look, now I appreciate it's all in, it's an underseal there, but look at those rear arches. You can find me an Anglia of this age with arches like that have clearly never ever been touched. These are the original sills. You can see the spot welds there, the original leaf spring mounts, things like that. So, things I found, which the owner may or may not know about, is there's a rot hole here. So that section will have to be repaired. He may just want to buy a piece for there. I'll have a word with him when I see him. He's bobbing in tomorrow to see me. But other than that, over here on the rear, I'm a poet and didn't know it. it's really blooming good. There's no rot in here at all. There's a couple of little tiny pinholes, such as here. Obviously, that'll need cutting out here. I don't even know if the owner's aware of those, to be honest, because we looked at it in his garage and I never saw those, but they're here. There are some holes that have been drilled for seats. These aren't the original seat mounting holes, but we're putting custom seats in, so we may or may not retain those. I may weld them up. I mean, obviously there's no rot around them. Yeah, to have this custom cross member put in, I really like it. I think that's, I see some work like that quite often on the internet. And I think it's really classy. The welding alone is literally 10 points there. Yeah, you won't see me turn anything like that out. There are some there's a tiny little pinhole here, which is a result of a drilled hole, believe it or not, so that'll just weld up. There's a little teeny tiny hole here, which I'll do from on the top. There's a couple of little tiny pinholes in here as well, in here. So I'll repair that as a full repair in that section, put a new piece in here. What I'm on with at the moment, there's a couple of little bits on the inner wing. That's damage from removing the horn bracket, ironically, which is welded on about 5 million times. There was a tiny little piece of aluminium pot refrigerated over here, and that was to put on to match over here, which had a rust hole under it. So they've put a piece on to cover a rust hole and then put a piece on the other side to make it look factory, which I thought was quite funny. And the piece I'm addressing today, in today's video, is this here. So this back section of the chassis rail, I'm going to cut that out. I'm just cleaning it up now to see how much of it I need to remove. It feels good at the top, actually. So it may just be a half a chassis rail or under that existing hole. We'll have a look. And then I'll make a lip on the bottom here and spot weld that back together along here, and then I'll make this piece on the end here to go over there. I'd like to take all this out here and then make sure this cross member, which I think is solid, but now's the time to look at it. It's got a bit of a dint in there where it's caught on something at some time in its life. So if that's caught in the ingress of rot, I need to address it right now. Luckily, there'll be a panel in here, a section, a strengthening section with threads cut in for these two bolts here. They're 5/16 UNFs. These are going to become the gearbox cross member, obviously. Again, Milton Race Prep. So these need to stay, hence why he's put bolts in. But luckily, these don't go as far as that. So that piece is out. And then what I'll do is I'll just butt weld a piece in there. I may even put a slight swage and just bob it up the back and then seam weld it along. But yeah, so nice little repair there to do. This side looks good, but obviously because there's rust at that side, I'll clean all this off and check. And then I'll start on this section here, which although it's a slightly more complicated shape, there isn't really anything majorly bad about it. It's a pretty easy repair. It has gone up the edge there, so I will have to go up to here. I may make a whole section. We'll see as yet what is required. I don't like to take out too much of the original steel, especially on a car that's so original like this. I think it's had a bit of a crunch in here, but this is straight and square and in the right place. So obviously these create datum, so I'm going to keep that in place. He said he... Should be able to see that. I've zoomed in a bit. You can see the rust holes. Actually, that's not bad. You can see the top part. I mean, from that hole upwards is absolutely solid as a rock. All this is solid as well, which is quite a complicated shape, so that's good. This part here looks good. All this looks good. I think it might just be a case of just slicing across there, but that'll come as I go. Let me just zoom you out a tiny bit. There you go. Across here. Now this is thick stuff, obviously. It's not, I mean, it's not like 2 mil thick or anything like that, but I consider this thick stuff is about 20 gauge, 18 gauge, something like that. You can see it's been crunched up there. That isn't right. That shape is definitely wrong. It's been jacked up or bumped or hit or something from up underneath. And as you can see, it's opened this seam here. That's not a drainage channel at all. I may actually put one in there. There should be a hole here. As you can see, it's heavily perforated, but if you look at this side, that's the original drainage hole. So I will replace that once it's done, or maybe before, I don't know yet. We can see further down the chassis rail where the aluminium was riveted over. It's pretty bad at this side as well. Again, these are jacking marks. This is where it's been jacked up and damaged. That's just a hole that's been drilled and screwed into. So that's all right, I can just weld that up. I can weld that up ironically, but I will cut all this piece out. Now then, quick word of advice here. This is the part where everybody goes, right, buy one of them and whop it in. See, this is a chassis rail, and this puts all the strength into the car and holds the strength in the car. So, with that in mind, where this is tied in here, there is literally no rust or rot whatsoever. For whatever reason, there isn't. So I'm going to cut this section out here and replace it, and then do this section here. Okay? Then that increases the strength of this panel, because obviously I'll be removing any damage and rot. And then I will be putting that strength back in, so I can move the ramp arm up to here, cut that piece out, and then that's all strong again. Now bear in mind, just for a second, that your chassis rails hold your suspension, your brakes, your steering, and all the tub together. So anybody ever says, yeah, it's all right, sack it all out. No, absolutely not. Right, so you should have just seen me do a bit of a montage there while I clip this piece out. I've cut across there in what I can only describe as the most embarrassing cut I've ever done in my life. I've gone about 1 centimetre over here, 10 millipeppers, and this was just embarrassing. However, I can fix that, no problem at all. Once you can weld, you don't need to worry about cutting a little bit too much out. I have this to dress off here, which I'll do in the same fashion as I've done this. What I thought I would draw your attention to is that this is the strengthening panel, which goes in here, that these bolts are bolted through. Obviously, they don't ever just weld a nut in there, so if you ever do a modification, you need to put a piece of thicker steel in there. You should be able to see there that it's pretty heavy artillery. Now, this little corner, even if I nick that off, it's not the end of the world. But obviously, I'll weld through that when I weld up, and that'll all be cleaned back up and welded back in. This edge here is a lovely surprise. It's incredibly solid, incredibly strong. I don't think it's ever been repaired. It's original. I will need to dress it a little bit with the hammer and dolly and clean off these remnants of spot welds, obviously. I need to trim this section out here. Here where my thumb is. So I want that straight across there and down. I'll probably just have to nick into that chassis rail, and I'll weld that up on the outside. I'll then clean all this off and dress that piece there and remove this piece here. You can see that where the flap goes under the floor. That's still attached, and that is original, so I need to get that off. Very good news. So I'll repair that, get it ready for a new section, and we'll start making a new section and start welding her in. Lovely jubbly. So, drawing your attention to the very quick update on this build. There you can see the rot holes, okay, the pinholes. They actually weren't that bad. Again, for the age of the car, you've got to remember this is over 60 years old. You know, if you're over 60 and you feel as good as this is. Next step on this, as you can see, I have cleaned the edges. I will also point out, if you noticed, the spot welds, there was one here, and one here, and one here, and that was it. So in what I would suggest is good 10-inch of steel. No, gentlemen tend to over-exaggerate when they talk about inches, but there you go. Say 10 inches of prime iron there. There were 3 spot welds. Now, I'll be putting more in than that. I like it to be too strong rather than not strong enough. However, it's been like that from Ford ever since it was built, and it's been fine. So I've cleaned that up. I've cleaned here. One little tiny issue there that I think I've got rid of with the wire wheel. And you see there's a little bit of bronze there, which is obviously that has been brazed on originally. Now, I don't know if that's done by Ford or if that's a previous repair. But obviously if you try to weld to braze, it's awkward. It melts at a lower temperature, it spits. And obviously you can't weld to a braze. Brazing is fine. People like to slate brazing. Brazing is a perfectly good and acceptable method of welding and repair. And it's really, really, really strong. Probably stronger than proper welding if you do it. Well, fusion welding, sorry when I say proper welding. Either way, not getting into that discussion. The fact is it's just as good. So next job now, I will bob a bit of paint on there and I'll start making the section to go in. And then once I've obviously welded in, I'll paint it all again. Shouldn't need any seam sealer on here once I'm finished, but we'll have a look. Okie dokie. So, if you join me back, there you can see the cleaned up and painted bit. I'm going to put a blob more paint around this actually when I put the camera down, because I didn't realise until I put the torch on I missed a few bits. And in all honesty, I was painting it with with an artist brush, because my daughter left these in my car the other day and I didn't realise I didn't have a paintbrush. So I've let that dry while I had my dinner. I should have put another coat on it. I've made a patch here, or a repair section is probably a more appropriate word. As you can see, I've painted that inside. I've outfitted it with the repair piece. Let me just zoom you out. With the hole in the repair piece, I've angled if you look at this piece here, you can't see it very clearly, but it is angled off at the end. So I've angled that all off. Thus, I've popped it, and what I didn't show you is I've repaired this corner here. Look, I've welded a bit in. Just to go, that fits in there quite beautifully. It's still dripping a little bit of red oxide. And the welding process is going to be that when I hold this here first, because it does fit nicely, anywhere that's a little behind, a little behind like that, I'm going to weld up first. And then I'm going to push it in a bit, because obviously I can't get this any straighter than that. This is a straight edge, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a wiggle in that here and there. So I'll weld those bits first, and then I'll push these in to match it. I may weld those in first and then push this in to match it. It's a little bit of one of those, but I can't just clamp it in and dress it and weld it in one go, I don't think. So what I'll do is I'll stick another coat of paint on there with my newly acquired paintbrush from the local shop. I just went out and had my dinner, so I will get that painted up and clamped up, and then I'll start the welding process and I'll let you watch that. in the following montage, well, in the montage I've literally just done, I had to stop in the middle. It's made a bit of a messy weld, unfortunately, here. My mask wouldn't work. It suddenly just went to grime. Well, it must have been the battery or something, because it just simply wouldn't weld. But as you can see, that piece is now in. Sat nice and flat here. It'll dress up a little teeny tiny bit up to there, where this is a tiny bit out of shape. This will all grind back. Obviously, there's a tiny little pinhole here, which I'll get when I do these. What I'm going to do for these is simply run a drill bit through each of those, just to make sure I've cleaned the paint out of them, and then clamp it up really, really tight, and then spot weld those in on a really high setting. I've done this on number 3 of 8. Sorry, 7, 3 of 7, so about half amps, a little less. Quite a low wire feed. It has made a few blobs. As I say, this is when this all went really well once I'd fixed it again. But yeah, it did it here and it did it here, which is ironically the worst 2 places it could possibly have done it. You can see that I've welded up the little tiny split that I put in there. Oh, you're in focus, sorry. And I've welded all the way along here. Just need to watch these when I grind back. Tiny bit of dressing just in the middle there, just to get that to fit perfectly. But as you should be able to see, that's made a really nice job.